good afternoon, and good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the GCP's introductory webinar on the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. We're very happy that you're here with us today. As people join, we're going to proceed to review the anti-competition trust statement. By virtue of participating in this meeting, which is being recorded, you consent to this antitrust agreement statement, competition law policy of the Global Coffee Platform. There shall be no discussion of agreements or concerted actions that may restrain competition, and this prohibition includes discussion of current or future prices, margins, discounts, the timing of price changes, costs, capacities, customers, suppliers, product and marketing plans, sales projections, credit terms, or other competitively sensitive information relating to your business. We will hope to be able to address questions in this session, but since time is rather short, we ask you to please put them into the Q&A box and we'll address them if time permits. The webinar is being recorded, and if you would like to take advantage of translation services to Portuguese or Spanish, we encourage you to please click on the globe box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Coming up today, we have a very exciting program. It is going to be conducted in two parts. First, we're going to talk about the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, what the code is, how it can be applied, how it came to be refreshed, and have a very interesting discussion about how we can all use it to advance our common understanding of sustainability and opportunities to apply it in our businesses. We'll also have an interactive panel with coffee value chain stakeholders. We have a wonderful panel of coffee leaders today, and we are looking forward to some very thoughtful and interesting discussion. Our goal is to create a thriving and sustainable coffee sector. We're all in it together, and this is a very interesting and wonderful instrument that we have to help us create a thriving and sustainable coffee sector. Some of you have seen this slide before. We wanted to review a little bit about what the GCP has been doing to promote collective sustainable sourcing. It involves the entire value chain from farm through to the consumer. And so in these pictures, you can see that we are working on sustainable coffee production. We are working on an equivalence mechanism in the Global Coffee Platform to help sustainability schemes be found equivalent to the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. So we have farmers and traders involved, and then we have roasters and retailers involved as we move through the chain. We're encouraging the collective reporting effort through the GCP snapshot, where roasters and retailers annually declare their progress in sustainable procurement. And finally, we have our consumers, who are very important in this effort. We hope to reach them with all of the good news about how coffee is an engine for sustainable, progressive, and good development. And this all flows to the SDGs. So in today's program, we're going to take a good look at the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, which we're introducing as a common language that everyone can enjoy and employ to help increase sustainability progress.
Coffee is more than a beloved beverage. It's a positive engine for economic and social development and the conservation of nature. More than 25 million families and farming communities can be found working on 12.5 million coffee farms in more than 50 countries, most of whom are smallholders, with women providing up to 70% of the labor in coffee production. However, coffee and the people that rely on it are being negatively impacted by price volatility, increased inequality, and the ongoing climate crisis, hampering sustainability progress and jeopardizing millions of livelihoods. If grown sustainably, coffee drives economic and social development in coffee regions and can serve as a natural climate solution. So, what can we do? The first step is to establish a common language that makes sustainability understandable and actionable for all involved in the coffee sector. Thanks to the contributions from around the world and across the coffee value chain, the Global Coffee Platform is pleased to present a newly revised sector-wide reference on the foundations of sustainability, the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. Through this common language, we can align the way we refer to, promote, and measure the uptake of sustainable coffee production. And we can better monitor progress to increase supply and demand of sustainable coffee. And while the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code covers the beginning of the supply chain, downstream actors can help share the responsibility for sustainability by supporting and incentivizing the efforts of coffee producers to introduce and follow baseline principles of sustainable production, and by adopting equitable trading and sourcing practices. Together, we can use this reference code and advance towards a thriving, sustainable coffee sector for generations to come.
The Coffee Sustainability Reference Code sits on the shoulders of many sustainability champions who have been working hard on this for many years. But we still have more to do. Our efforts are sometimes so fragmented that we're not reaching all of the farmers and communities that we want to reach to help provide the enabling environment that they need to become more prosperous and to create more well-being in their communities. The Coffee Sustainability Reference Code is a wonderful opportunity for us all to start working with a language that will bring common understanding and common action and empower us to be more effective. I'd like to turn the program to two wonderful people, Helga Buitrago, GCP's Director of Programs and Corporate Partnerships, and John Schluter, the chairman of Cafe Africa and chair of the GCP Technical Committee, and they're going to walk us through the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code, how it came to be, and how we can engage with it. John? We need you to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Still learning how to use Zoom, even after a year and a half. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Mary, for that introduction, and welcome to everybody. The technical committee, along with the advisory task force, has been working for the last year and a bit over, actually, on the revision of the code. And just what is this code? The code, as the video said, is a common language and a basis for sustainability. We aim to make sustainability understandable, and we aim to make it possible to put into action. And it is designed for all users along the value chain. As you can see, we have a crowded picture there, but it does cover the different levels all along the value chain, way from the producer all the way through to the end user and consumer. Because there's a lot of interest from the consumers these days in sustainability. I think everybody has followed COP26, and we will doubtless hear much more about that in the weeks to come. Could we go to the next slide, please? So who are the users of the Baseline Coffee Code? Well, primarily the code is designed for coffee producers and for those who are dealing with the producers to bring the coffee to the point of export and shipment. So it covers the production, the processing, and the movement of coffee. It includes aspects of traceability, and it's being used by managers of producer groups. It's being used not only by the producers themselves, of course, but also by traders, by roasters, and by retailers. But it's also important for governments, for regions, for financial institutions, for NGOs and donor agents, for other sustainability standards, and for producing countries and their coffee platforms, because it provides a common language and a common base from which to start the discussion about accessing sustainability. We have to recognize that a lot has been done. The sustainability standards which already exist and which are members of Global Coffee Platform have already done much to promote sustainability. And we hope that this revision of the code will actually help the entire industry in moving the agenda forward. Next slide, please. Why is the code relevant and why did we need to revise it? Well, as the picture shows, there are quite a lot of producers who have been struggling. In the last few years, while we were revising the code, we were dealing with a market which generally was rather low. If you look at the market today, it is a little bit better, quite considerably better for the producers. So some of them are smiling, but they are still confronted by the problems of volatility, of inequalities in the supply chain, and as we're being reminded on the daily news this week, by the problems of climate change. So we needed to do the revision in order to make the code fit for the future and fit for a new generation of coffee growers. And we've got new challenges coming along as well. We have the due diligence legislations which are appearing in the consuming countries, with responsibility coming into the sector for the users and roasters, retailers who buy coffee and where that coffee comes from. And increasingly an interest on the part of consumers who like to know where the coffee is coming from, and also how it was produced and whether the farmers are receiving a reasonable return for their work. Next slide, please. So in doing this revision, what we did was we had a wide-ranging consultation with the industry, from the producers, both small and large, through to traders, through roasters, retailers. We included the financiers, and we had a lot of response to the consultative process through which we went. As we did it during the year of COVID, most of it was done online. But in some of the producing countries, we were able to hold face-to-face meetings, which personally I've always preferred, but we are getting used to webinars and Zoom these days. I guess one day we will get back to face-to-face more often. The role of the technical committee and the advisory task force, and just to say that the technical committee and task force are drawn from the producers and the roasters and the retailers. We had a very wide spectrum of input, also civil society, was to evaluate the changes that were being discussed and proposed and to come up with the revision of the code. And you'll see on the graph that out of the participants who gave us information and responded, 38% of them came from GCP members and 62% came from non-members. So we didn't limit ourselves just to GCP members. We actually included as wide a spectrum as we could reach of the coffee sector. Next slide, please. One of the things we liked in our work was a visualization of the revision of the code. And this was a visualization of the meeting in Brazil. And one of the things I liked about that was in Brazil, they had the faces of the people who were leading the meeting about the code revision and the consultative process. And it gave a very vibrant sense to the meetings that we had with the producers. But I need to pass over to Helga, because she will give us an overview of the revision of the code, what it contains, and what actually it now leads onto. So can I hand over to you, Helga?
Thank you, John. Yes, I'm really excited to share with you the results of all the work that John mentioned. And it's really going to be only a beginning, highlighting the main features, and more an invitation for you to go to our website, download the code, and engage with it. As of today, we actually have, in addition to the English version, we have available the translations in Portuguese, in Spanish, in Vietnamese, and in Bahasa. So that helps us also to bring the message to a more wider audience. On this slide, you will see the overview of the principles. As John mentioned, we really wanted to make this more accessible and digestible. So we have 12 principles that you will see categorized under the economic, the social, and the environmental dimension, recognizing that these dimensions are interdependent and interrelated. So I really invite you to dive into the code and see what are the new practices. I would like to highlight, for example, that we have a new principle on climate that elaborates on the practices that could be introduced to reduce carbon emissions and to support farmers towards climate adaptation. Another feature of the code is that we have really tried to make an effort to articulate very clearly how this code articulates with other frameworks. So, and to the goals that GCP has and the goals that the coffee sector has. So under each of the chapters, you will see the principles and you will see how they connect to the Sustainable Development Goals. You will see that for each of the chapters. And if we go to the next slide, you will also see that on each of the chapters, we have a goal statement. This is what are the outcomes that we would like to see once the practices and the principles are implemented. And these goal statements are connected not only to the goals of the coffee sector, but also with the goals of GCP, the mission of GCP, that is farmer prosperity, social well-being, and conservation of nature. Then diving more into the code, you will see here the general structure. So for each of the dimensions, we will have a set of principles, practices, and expected results. You will see that the principles are the objectives that we would like to achieve. So the outcomes that we would like to see. And these principles are broken down into practices that are the activities that can be implemented to achieve those principles. Then you will see that the practices are further broken down into expected results. And these are the more measurable activities. For the results, you will see if this applies to individual smallholders, to groups, or to farms. And in an effort to support more aligned measurement of sustainability outcomes, we have also connected to the Coffee Data Standard. The Coffee Data Standard is a set of indicators that measure sustainability performance. So whenever there's a indicator in the Coffee Data Standard that is connected to the measures or the expected results, you will see this connection in the code as well. And while all the practices reflect a minimum level of baseline sustainability, we know that the reality in different contexts is very complex, and not all these expected results are going to be there. So we have a set of critical practices that are the practices that we hope to eradicate from the sector, like no worse forms of child labor, no forced labor, no deforestation, and no use of highly hazardous pesticides. But we have also introduced a critical practice on continuous improvement to ensure that where the expected results are not met, that there's a time-bound plan to achieve that level of baseline. This is basically, in a snapshot, what the structure of the code is about. So now that we have this code, what happens next? So we're quite keen to support the embracement of this code, and we have identified during the consultation that there are many challenges in some of the pesticides that are included in the list of prohibited materials or the list of materials to be phased out. So we are putting together a pesticides action group, including members of all the segments of the supply chain, and also from diverse origins, to help us to prioritize which pesticides we should be looking our attention to and trying to identify options for the transition to be able to phase out those pesticides. That work starts soon, and we'll be calling within the GCP membership for expressions of interest. Then we're going to be also revising the equivalence mechanism, which is the framework that GCP uses to assess which schemes can be considered equivalent to the baseline, to the coffee sustainability reference code. That work is also going to start soon, and you're going to be seeing on our website the project description and how you can engage. Last but not least, then we're going to be making an effort to bring this code to the sector. So we're going to be engaging with the different users that John mentioned to try to see how they can use this code and how we can support them in this endeavor. Then finally, one of the main outcomes of the consultation was that while the code was very well received, there was a very, very valid concern about the burden of sustainability only falling at the farmer level. And GCP members believe that sustainability is a shared responsibility. So we are committed in terms of how we can further expand this principle of shared responsibility and how working with different actors in the supply chain, we can further promote the adoption of sustainable practices.
Thank you, John and Helga, for this very quick but helpful introduction to the Coffee Reference Sustainability Code. I'd like to encourage our audience, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to respond to them at the end of the program, or if not, we'll follow up with you. At this time, I'd like to invite everyone to our virtual living room, and we're going to have a conversation with coffee value chain actors. And as I introduce you, fine panelists, will you please put your videos and microphones on. I would like to introduce Matt Smith from Westrock Coffee, S&D Coffee and Tea, the Executive Vice President, Supply Chain. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jonathan Clark, who is a Senior Trader and Director of Dacman Vietnam Limited. I'd also like to welcome Gustavo Garcia, the System Director at 4C Services. And I would like to welcome Paramita Mentari Kusuma, who is the Executive Director of Skopi Indonesia. We're going to address some questions with these panelists who are participating from all different parts of the supply chain to bring us a 360-degree look at what working with the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code looks like. We'll be talking about 3 questions. First, we have, how do you think the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code can be valuable to your team and colleagues to increase awareness? And then we'll talk about what are some ways that companies and organizations could work with the code. And then finally, we'll take a look at what are some ways that we think the code can help coffee farmers address farm level sustainability issues. Then I'd like to invite Matt Smith to our virtual living room. Matt, welcome and thank you for sharing your perspectives with us today. The question that we'd like to ask you is, how do you think the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code can be valuable to help your team and colleagues increase awareness and capacity to address challenges? Take it away.
Thank you, Mary. Well, that's a great question and an issue that I've been grappling with far more regularly since the recent launch of the Sustainable Reference Code and Westrock Coffee's joining the Global Coffee Platform. I think that the clear and concise messaging that the code is bringing to the often nuanced definition of sustainability in the coffee supply chain is starting to bear fruit internally with our colleagues, with my colleagues, and then also with our suppliers. It's going to be even more important as we try and take this message and market our sustainable supply chains to the thousands of customers that Westrock S&D has. As a private label food service roaster, I don't really have the luxury of a one-size-fits-all sustainability approach because we have so many different needs within our customer base. So I really need the flexibility to meet the customers, the suppliers, and the producers where they are in their sustainability journey today. And then we can collectively build the resilient, impactful, equitable supply chains of tomorrow. But first, I have to get them on board. And I think that the Sustainable Reference Code does a great job of balancing investment cost, rigor, and inclusiveness to ensure that everyone can see a path towards a sustainable future. So that's really kind of how I'm looking at it internally and how I'm using it to sensitize the people that I talk to daily. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. That's those thoughts are very interesting, particularly from your perspective as a consumer-facing sustainability champion. So it seems interesting now to segue to question 2. And Gustavo, I'm going to bowl you this question from more of a producer-facing perspective. What are some ways that you envision your organization can work with the code?
Very important question, Mary. And 4C certification system is recognized as equivalent to the GCP reference code. And this recognition is a further confirmation of the relevance of the 4C code and the credibility of the entire scheme. So in our view, this equivalence represents an additional source of inputs to the already existing public consultation and feedback channels that we have in place at 4C. So in that sense, it also helps to strengthen the concept of an independent and impartial certification, which is increasingly present in the consumers' minds. So this is our view on the main value from our perspective.
Thank you, Gustavo. And now I'd like to welcome Paramita Mentari Kusuma to answer this question from her perspective as Executive Director of Skopje in Indonesia.
Hi, Mary, and thank you for the question. So for this one, in the Indonesian context and Skopje as a national platform, we can see that this code can be a great addition to the national sustainability curriculum for our Arabica and Robusta coffee, which we have been developed, facilitated as well by Global Coffee Platform, which are disseminated to thousands of coffee farmers through our master trainers. So it's also will help us in developing the Indonesia Sustainable Coffee Roadmap, which is planned to be developed within this year. So we already have this idea with our members, because we are also a platform, that we will focus on like 4 topics such as agroforestry, climate, environmental friendly, and productivity, where we can be leveraged in the action plan that we want to do in this roadmap, but we have to link it some ways with the 3 dimensions, which are already mentioned in this code. Also, we can also use it for our monitoring and evaluation indicators reference. It helps us a lot, so we can have interlinkages with the global context as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mentari. What I hear is really a highlight on how much this code can help improve efficiency and identify specific issues that you really want to work on locally that really resonate with the challenges you face every day. Thank you, Mentari. And Jonathan Clark, welcome to the living room. We would love to hear your perspectives on ways that you envision your organization working with the code.
Thank you, Mary. So firstly, under our sustainable profitability and living income focus, section 1. Article 1.2 of the code requires producers to maintain records for planning and decision making. So one of the outcomes is better data on producer income and the size of the living gap that may need to be filled. for example. Secondly, our focus to be responsible citizens. Article 4.1 of the code requires the right to a childhood and that children under 15 should be in school. Now, we have been helping coffee communities with access to education in partnership with overseas partners. We've built over 60 new schools in coffee farming communities, and the project continues. Sections or Article 6.62 of the code relates to safe working practice, a safe working environment in handling pesticides. And we must now begin to work with our industry partners to replace phosphine fumigation in the warehouse with alternatives. This pesticide is used worldwide by the coffee industry and has now jumped into the prohibited section of the pesticide list of this code. Under our regenerative, sorry, just one more thing. So under our regenerative farming focus, we can use this code to increase our low carbon supply chains. Article 11.3.1 requires producers to increase the use of organic fertilizer through leaf litter, using cherry skins to reduce compost and mulch. And also Article 12.12 requires farmers to increase the level of forest, fruit, and other trees to increase shade, foster biodiversity, and become more diverse. So these are just examples of how the code enables us with our strategies in the sustainability sector.
Jonathan, thank you. I am very impressed by your familiarity with the code, and I aspire to that same familiarity. Now I want to circle back to Matt. We're in a continuum of coffee sustainability development. And so Matt, from more of a consumer-facing perspective, how do you see your organization working with this code?
Sure. That was a very detailed technical approach that we got from the other three panelists on implementation at origin, which is very helpful. And Westrock's also been involved extensively in origin sustainability work for the last 10 or 12 years. We actually started as an export operation in 2009 in Rwanda. So that is the lens that we try to bring to our sustainability efforts as a roaster. Over the last decade, there's been an enormous amount of amazing work done by producers, exporters, importers, roasters, and they've all been pushing the sustainability conversation forward, but not always in a cohesive direction. So I don't think that was really about protecting sustainability IP, but more just everyone trying to respond quickly to an evolving landscape without really any blueprint for what that finished product was supposed to be. So I think many people in the industry like myself, especially on the consuming side, are realizing that without a common code, we're going to struggle to distill the core sustainability focal points into something that can be understood and that will ultimately be valued by the end consumer, who is not a sustainability expert for the most part. So I think with the sustainable reference code, we have the opportunity to do that. Which is why Westrock is incorporating many of the elements of the code into our own responsibly sourcing program. And I would think that other roasters will likely do the same. This is how, others in the supply chain other than just the producers are going to engage in, the drive towards a sustainable future. It's not just, the entire burden does not have to be on the producers, and it shouldn't be. So we will be incorporating it into our own responsible sourcing goals. And I think the continuous improvement aspect of the code will allow for some really honest dialogues within the supply chain about the direction we all need to be moving. And as a buyer, I feel like I'm more actively involved in the long-term outcomes than if I were to rely solely on a third-party solution to deliver sustainability to my roasting factory. So I think that this code will quickly become the litmus test for the 1 million bags plus that we buy annually.
Well, that's very encouraging use of the code and really can help it to become the common language that we hope it can be. That is the great opportunity with the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code. And now I'd like to talk about ways we think the code can help coffee farmers address farm level sustainability issues, because we really want this code to be a wonderful instrument to promote the enabling environment that we all want to promote to increase the production of sustainable coffee and also the consumption of sustainable coffee. Mentari, can you speak to this, please, for us?
Yeah, sure, Mary. So representing Indonesia as a producer country, we want to highlight this code as a reference to first and foremost the dimension of economy, of course, to achieve higher economic value, which is heavily related to livelihood, living income, because without that, it's really hard to achieve the social and environmental aspect from our perspective. And also for the coffee farmers at the farm level, this might be not to boost their effectiveness in what they do. How can you explain to them that you're going to be more effective if you apply all this? But maybe we can say that these are very practical, as a practical common reference for them, that we have seen there are the principles, the practicality, and the expected result that can be achieved from each of the dimension. And also this is a reference in conducting the GAP and post-harvest techniques by our master trainers who are already in 13 provinces in Indonesia, and also as a baseline indicators for this GAP implementation measurement at the farm level.
Mentari, thank you for that concise and practical illumination of how the code can be used. I'm going to let our panelists know we have to give really concise answers because we're now being pushed for time. Gustavo, what can you tell us about this, please?
I cannot agree more with what Paramita mentioned. So training and technical assistance programs can use the Coffee Sustainability Reference Code as a reference. In my view, these activities are key to expanding the adoption of sustainability or sustainable practices at a producer level. And as a result, the supply of the certified sustainable coffee can be increased. So I think training and technical assistance is crucial and will benefit from the new version of the code.
Thank you, Gustavo. Jonathan, could you quickly add something?
Sure. Well, I think it helps farmers. Certainly, we formalized that they must be trained and implement GAP, good agricultural practices, as defined by applicable national programs, which also puts a responsibility on government agricultural departments to assist coffee growers using the most suitable farming techniques relevant to each country. Also, the under resource conservation, section 10.2.2 on improving soil fertility. It requires farmers to increase soil cover, which can be grasses, weeds, wild vegetables, which in turn prevents soil erosion, maintains soil moisture, reducing the need for irrigation, sequesters carbon, avoids the use of herbicides, protecting producers' health as well as that of consumers, and saving farmers money, creating better income. So there's just some examples of how the code helps farmers.
Thank you, Jonathan. Matt, Mentari, Gustavo, and Jonathan, thank you so much for being in our living room for this first important discussion of how we can use the code. I'd like to turn our program over to the Executive Director of the Global Coffee Platform, Annette Pencil.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, dear panelists. Thank you, Helga and John Schluter. this was just a marvelous next step in a longer journey. I want to thank everybody who was so much involved from the entire GCP team to make this a revision of the sustainability reference code a reality, and to all of you who have been participating in this next step of getting it out, launching it. At this point, actually, we can't stop, because this is just one important point, one step in the longer milestone of really living up to GCP's collective mission of advancing farmers' prosperity, social well-being, and conserving nature. This would not have been possible without our membership. And at that point, I really want to thank and commend our members who've been coming along this way and enabling the work that you have just been seeing in one part of the work. It's amazing to see the interest in the newly revised coffee sustainability reference code. And this instrument or tool, as we've heard from our panelists today, together with other work that is already underway or that can and must be scaled, is hopefully helping to propel us further, faster, to achieve our vision of a thriving and sustainable coffee sector for generations to come. The team is really amazing, and thank you, dear colleagues from all over the world who have really been essential to make this a success. And especially Helka, you have been leading this code revision, and now over to the next steps of bringing it further out there into the sector and into the hands of the different users who might want to work with it as a common language, moving us forward together. With that, I think we got also to the end of our webinar today, and I hand back to Mary.
Thank you, Annetta. We're very grateful for the time that you've all given us to start learning about and exploring the code. And we look forward to helping to bring the code to life as we move into 2022 with more online meetings and opportunities to explore and understand and see how we can all make the code into great action. And so now I'd like to invite everyone on our team who's been working today to bring this meeting to you, all of our panelists. Thank you so much, panelists. And also our GCP team, who's been diligently working on getting the technical aspects and scripts and all the organizations right behind the scenes. It's 10:43 and we've got just a minute or so left. And I would like to ask any of our panelists if they'd like to share some insights or something new that they learned from each other in our living room discussion.
Well, I was impressed by Jonathan's command of the articles, so I clearly need to brush up.
There is time, Matt, and this is just the start. We are happy to go forward with you and with everybody who is in this webinar today.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and John and Helka.
I would like to say one thing. There was a comment made about the fact that the load of sustainability shouldn't be on the head of the producers alone. And one of the things that we're looking very carefully at is how this shared responsibility can be brought all the way through the supply chain, the value chain, and a meaningful contribution made all the way through it so that coffee is good for everybody. And I think the message from COP26 must surely be, we can't just have brave words and new codes, which look very nice, but actually, unless we can put them into practice, and unless we can make an impact and be seen to making an impact, we will not be doing a good job for anybody in the value chain, and particularly the farmers. So that is the responsibility that we have, and I feel it's really important that we don't lose sight of that. COP26 is a daily reminder at the moment, and the climate change that we see around us is reminding us all the time that we have the responsibility, and this is an opportunity to promote it.
That's very well said, John. Thank you for sharing that. It's 10:45. We're going to end on time, but we want to send you all off with all of our best wishes and big invitation to explore the code. Contact us with your questions, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you very much for attending the meeting, and thank you, panelists.